Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and today continues the What's Next series on the channel, detailing the offseason options for all 30 teams across the NBA, and today's topic is the team with the second worst record in the league this season, the Phoenix Suns. Their current coaching situation is up in the air at the moment, and they could be in the market for a new one this offseason, an all too familiar position for Suns fans. There are some positives from this season for Phoenix, however, as they established a few real building blocks moving forward. We already know about Devin Booker, and he continued to be outstanding, while rookie DeAndre Ayton showed a ton of promise and progress through the year. TJ Warren improved his shooting drastically, and even Kelly Oubre might be a player worth keeping around. Unfortunately, players such as Josh Jackson and Dragan Bender continue to be disappointments, and Mikal Bridges' struggles as a shooter in both efficiency and volume could be signs of yet another wing bust for the Suns. As the team moves into free agency, they are at right around $83 million in committed payroll for next season, which gives them around $26 million in cap space. Once again, unfortunately for Suns fans, the team wasted the years of Booker playing at a near all-star level for around $3 million on his rookie contract, and his new max deal kicks in next year, paying him over $27 million a year, and they will need to be diligent about improving their team over the next couple of seasons before they more than likely sign Ayton to a big extension as well. Capitalizing on the benefits of the rookie wage scale and building a competitive team while your best young players are underpaid is a strategy that many of the more successful teams in the league have used to get to where they are now. But the Suns could find themselves more in the position that the Timberwolves find themselves in right now if they're not careful, with two young players on max deals severely limiting their flexibility moving forward because they wasted their opportunities to improve the team while they were being underpaid. In terms of free agency targets for the Suns, I wouldn't expect anything too crazy to happen. They are in need of a point guard and some help on the wings, as they seemingly have been for years now, and they've long been linked to Celtics guard Terry Rozier in the trade market. Signing him as a restricted free agent would certainly be a possibility, depending on a contract offered and the Celtics' own free agency variables. And bringing back Oubre in his own restricted free agency will be a priority as well. And I would expect them to focus on moves similar to that, rather than paying a ton of money long term to any one player. The other option I would mention that is kind of in the middle of the scale here would be to look at players that are in their primes but could still have some upside left that they won't necessarily have to break the bank to bring in. The parallel I'm thinking of here is the Sacramento Kings, who this time last year were in a fairly similar situation to where the Suns are now. So the Kings went out and signed Nemanja Bjelica to a fair deal to help them space the floor, and then went and traded for Harrison Barnes at the trade deadline for expiring contracts. Bjelica provided much needed spacing at the 4 spot, which allowed their other young players to flourish in expanded roles, while Barnes gave them another big body on the wing, and now they look like a much more promising team moving forward. Some targets in this category that would make sense to me for the Suns would be Nikola Mirotic and Terrence Ross. Mirotic is a well-known floor spacer at the 4 spot that could demand a good amount of money as a free agent, but Phoenix could throw a lot of money at him on a shorter-term deal in order to get some short-term benefit and positive momentum for the franchise moving forward without sacrificing too much flexibility. While the idea behind signing Ross would be that he would provide a similar role to the one that he filled for the Magic this season. A high-level shooter and occasional volume scorer that takes some of the offensive load and responsibility off of the young guys. But again, these are really middle-of-the-road solutions more than anything else. They aren't likely to be a big player for any of the max-level free agents anyway, or even second-tier guys like Tobias Harris, nor should they be interested in those guys anyway simply because they aren't a very good team right now, and they aren't one piece away from Western Conference contention. Instead, I would expect and advise them to simply keep an eye on the Rozier situation and maybe jump on that opportunity depending on how that and the draft play out. Try and bring back Oubre on a reasonable contract, or just let him walk if someone throws him a big deal, and conserve their cap space for flexibility moving forward and continue to build through the draft. They might go in the direction of some big one-year deals for veterans, similar to how they signed Trevor Ariza last offseason, but realistically that will probably just make them a mediocre lottery team next year, which doesn't help them in a meaningful way. And unfortunately for the Suns, there doesn't appear to be a trade that could really help them that isn't just a salary dump for a young asset or draft pick either. Their trade assets, for the most part, are either untouchable, like Booker and Ayton, or don't have much value, like Josh Jackson and the unproven other rookies. TJ Warren is a really nice cost-controlled piece that showed a ton of improvement this season, and is on a team-friendly deal that would attract a good amount of interest in a trade, but that seems more like a piece that the Suns would like to hold on to rather than give up. And I'm not sure they could realistically get a better asset in return, which defeats the purpose of the trade. And now we move on to the draft. The The Suns' lottery odds are on screen, and the obvious hope here is that they end up at number 1 or number 2, but they are at least guaranteed a top 7 pick. If they get the first overall pick for the second consecutive year, most people would expect them to pick Zion Williamson. However, there have been reports that if they were in that position, the Suns would actually prefer Ja Morant to Zion. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Morant's game as well, but I can't see a real reason to pass on Zion for any other player in this class, even for a player like Morant and a team as point guard needy as the Suns. Whether they selected him at 1 or 2, Morant would create a dynamic backcourt duo with Booker, and the development needed on his jump shot would be allowed to come about naturally alongside such a great shooter and playmaker like Booker. Personally, I would love to see Morant in a Suns uniform next season, although again, I think it would be a mistake to select him over Zion at number 1. But the possibilities, no matter where the Suns pick in the draft, are pretty fun to think about because they already have their franchise scorer in Booker and their starting center for the next decade in Ayton. If the odds don't go their way and they end up in the 3 to 7 range, things are completely up in the air for them. The size and playmaking and scoring promise of RJ Barrett would be tough to pass up at 3, and maybe that would be a non-traditional way of solving their point guard problem by using Barrett and Booker as their primary playmakers, with their size opening up all kinds of lineup possibilities as a result. Beyond that, DeAndre Hunter would be a good 3-and-D complementary option on the wing, aka hopefully the one that they've been trying to find in the draft for years, or maybe they'll target higher offensive upside wing players like Jarrett Culver or Cam Reddish. Lastly, if they were to go for a point guard, then the goal obviously would be Morant, but Darius Garland and even Kobe White represent intriguing possibilities at that position if they're set on getting a point guard in this draft, depending on how far down their selection lands within the top 7. Either way, this draft represents an awesome opportunity for the Suns to get a quality young player to add to Booker, Ayton, Warren, and maybe Oubre, as well as some of the other rookies from this year. And the key moving forward, just as it always has been for this team, is identifying the correct player to pick and developing them accordingly. Looking towards next season for the Suns, there are some intriguing possibilities for sure, even though they might not be as flashy or numerous as the ones covered in the last What's Next video on the New York Knicks. Despite their currently rocky coaching situation, they do still have 2 of the better young players in the league in Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and thank goodness for that, because without those guys, specifically Booker, this team would have little to no direction. I can't quite understand how a team that hasn't won 25 games since 2015 and has had their own picks all those years plus others in each of those off seasons doesn't have more relative young talent than it does. But this could always be the offseason in which they turn things around. I doubt the answer will come in free agency, where the list of players they could realistically get that would make sense for them to bring in is pretty small. They've never really been a big free agency destination in the first place. The closest they came was the LaMarcus Aldridge near signing when he left Portland for San Antonio a few years ago, so their focus will likely be on young players with upside like Terry Rozier, or simply bringing back Kelly Oubre in restricted free agency. There is always the possibility that they decide that between a high draft pick and a second-tier free agent signing, a player such as Tobias Harris or Julius Randle, for example, they could be playoff contenders next season. Now, that isn't my view on this team, as they're multiple pieces away from finishing in the top 8 of a deep Western Conference, but their front office history suggests that making smart moves might not be the outcome of this offseason. As always, for lottery teams, the draft and the offseason as a whole represent the potential for better days for fans of each team. But this offseason for the Suns will likely be more of a step in the right direction rather than a final step towards relevance. If they can play their cards right and select a player that could become an all-star in the future in the draft, or if the lottery ping pong balls fall their way and they luck into one anyway, that would be their 3rd potential future all-star on the roster, along with Booker and Ayton, which would obviously be a promising foundation to build upon. But as we've seen too many times in the past, this could also just prove to be another draft and off-season that the Suns fail to capitalize on the few correct roster-building decisions they've made over the past 4 years, and find themselves next year right back in the same place of hoping for progress from this roster, rather than having tangible evidence that progress is actually occurring. And that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.